Listen, I wrote an article in the Agora, which you've seen, about child trafficking going on today on the West Coast. And the child trafficking is largely in Aboriginal children because they know they can get them off reserves. We know what's going on. We even know there's police involvement in it, government, church involvement. And that can happen because this has never been dealt with. They know they can get away with the crimes of the past. They can carry on today. And this is how it's an issue that involves all of us. We're going to reinvent this country because we're going to have to say, we're not going to be part of this colonial system anymore. Where there's an Indian Act which segregates people into special laws. That was done away by the UN in the late 1940s. They abolished race-based legislation. So why do we have an Indian Act in Canada? I mean, all of that's got to change if we're going to have real change and healing. Anybody else want to speak right now?
Oh, I just wanted to add one more thing,
Yeah.
though, is that to my sister and to my brother here from Six Nations, is that I do understand when you talk about the mush hole. Because when I was there at the site, that is one of the places that they did take me. And it's called the museum now, but it was the mush hole.
Woodland Cultural Center.
Yeah, bull. As soon as I walked in that door, I felt something come over me.
Oh, yeah.
And then we went up to the top floor, where apparently a lot of terrible atrocities happened to babies and young children up there. And I could feel it. And it got so bad that it overcame me that I was actually almost physically ill. I had to get out of there. And when I walked out and stood on that veranda and I looked over to the orchard, I could hear little voices crying at me to help me, help me. And then as we drove away, I looked up and there's like a steeple kind of thing on the very top of the building. And I know I saw something in that window. But even as I drove away, I could feel it in my heart. And they're crying in there. They want that proper burial. They want to be able to go out that western door. And we need to let them do that. I don't know how.
There is a way of finding the burial sites with something called LIDAR, light penetrating radar, and it's the other one, GPR, ground penetrating radar. So we can locate the sites that way. At the mush hole, it's also said that wherever each tree in the orchard is where a child is laid.
There is.
They covered up the burial by planting a tree on top.
Yep.
So they've already marked those ones for us. But the burial's out behind Port Alberni School. I went out there too after I saw Kevin's movie. And I went to the school. And as others have mentioned, Pat mentioned, when you go to these schools, there's a horrible feeling that goes through your body. And I felt that going through Port Alberni. And there's still people working there were people still working in that building up until about 3 years ago. They now have a new office. It's part of what the band office was. And the people working inside there, I don't know how they do it every day, but they worked in there all those years. And those stories that you hear about ghosts and spirits where things will suddenly tip over for no reason. Things like that happen there. And it gives you a shudder when you hear somebody speak of that from their heart.
You know, behind that school, we had a forensic team go in and they did a survey and they found sinkholes. And one of these guys had been to Bosnia and had worked on mass graves there. And he said there's so many sinkholes back there. He says there's a hell of a lot of children in there. And anyone can tell you that, anyone who's trained in forensics. I went to the RCMP, as I've done a number of times, and this guy denied a lot of stuff for a while, and finally he exploded at me and he said, look, we know there's kids buried there, but who wants to open up that can of worms? So the police themselves are admitting they're buried there, that there's mass graves there. And so it's up to the citizens, it's up to all of us to make this happen, because every level of authority is colluding in the cover-up of this crime. And don't forget as well, a lot of the children were burned. The bodies were burned. If you go to our website, which is hiddenfromhistory.org, there's an interview in there with a woman, Irene Favel, a native woman, who she's in her 70s now, but this was a CBC town hall meeting in Regina in July 2008. And she got up and she said when she was a little girl in the Muskegon Catholic residential school in Saskatchewan, there was a little girl who had been raped by a priest, and when she gave birth to that child, she was only like 12 years old, she saw the priest take the newborn baby and throw it alive into the furnace. That was on the CBC town hall meeting, and the white woman who was interviewing her didn't bat an eye. It's like she had no emotional response at all. It was like nothing. And that too much describes where white Canada's still at on this. They haven't felt it in here. and this is why we have to appeal to people's hearts.
All right, shall we continue on up to our...
Let's walk up to St. Mike's.
Okay, so we'll need help.
Now, can I
need
just...
to gather up the crosses that are laid out. So if someone would like to help
I just
gather
want to
those up.
share something. Can I please? One moment. When we went there, paid a visit a couple of years ago, I was standing outside innocently handing out some information. And a security guard from that church where we're going now came out and said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just handing out information." He said, "Well, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I said, "Why? I'm not doing anything wrong." He says, "Yeah, you're going to have to leave or I'm going to have to call the police." And I said, "Well, I guess you're going to have to call the police then." And he said, "What do you people want anyways? Do you want us to cry?" And then he turned around and said, and I was just shocked by this statement. He said, "It's too bad it wasn't the good old days. The British would have just came out and shot yous." And it just, my heart just sunk. And consequently, the police came shortly after that, and two of them came, and I went into the church to warm up a bit. It was Palm Sunday. And two officers came, and they were very nice, and they spoke with me and listened to what I told them, told them why we were there and what it was about. And, and I did mention what this guy had said, but I guess they just thought, well, consider the source and let it go. That's kind of the only way that I could deal with it. But just to let you know that this is going to be kind of triggering for me to go back to this church where we're going right now, and that's the reason why.
Sorry.
And thank you so much. Yeah.
Strong women walking with
All right.
you.
Miigwech, thank you for being here, for showing that support, because that's what you're doing.
So we'll carry the banner in front and everybody follow.
Okay, we'll be
Going
to
up
gather
to St.
things
Mike's.
up.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's only 1 block north.